Okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to help you understand the formation of a meander, and I'm going to show you how to draw the sequence of diagrams that help explain the formation of this particular feature. Before we have a look at the diagrams that you need to draw, let's just have a look at what this feature actually is. Okay, so a meander is quite simply a bend in the river, and you can see in this third diagram here that we have a bend in the river. But it actually starts off life as a straight river channel. And the first thing that has to happen is the river has to have entered a relatively flat landscape, which you can see is here. So the gradient of the river has to have flattened out. Now, what that results in is a lot more what we call lateral erosion. Now, this is sideways erosion, where the river's more likely to be eroding on the river banks, that's the two edges, than it will be on the base. Now, when it's eroding more on the base, we call that vertical erosion. Okay, but that mainly happens in the upper course when it's high in the mountains. As it gets to the flatter landscapes where you start to find the rivers meandering, most of the energy is sideways movement, which is lateral erosion. Now, another key feature of the formation of a meander is that the river has to be moving from shallower areas, and these are called riffles, as in riffles, and you can see them down here, to deeper areas. Now, these are called pools. Okay. Now, this continual movement from a pool to a riffle, and we can see a pool, a riffle, a pool, a riffle, a pool, actually causes the river to the current of the water, or the fastest current, to start moving across the channel. So what it's going to be doing is it's going to be moving from here. Instead of moving straight down, it's actually going to be diverted to this riverbank, where it will collide with the riverbank and then start moving across. Okay. And that's just because actually there's in a riffle, when it's shallower, there's a lot more friction in the river, which slows it down. And in a pool, because it's deeper, there's less friction in the river, and therefore it speeds up again. Okay. Now this fastest current has got a name. It's called a tholweg, and it's just the fastest part of the river. Now, what you've now got to understand is, because the river is moving back and forward across the river channel, over here on this riverbank, where it collides with the riverbank, there's going to be a lot more erosion. Okay, likewise over here, you're going to get more erosion happening. And over here, you're going to get more erosion. And that's because the fastest current is hitting these parts. Okay, so I'll come back to erosion in a second. On the other side of the river, I'm just going to change my pen color to show you this. The river's traveling a lot slower in this area. Also in this area. So I'm on the opposite for where the fastest current is. So basically we're looking at where the slowest river current would be. And because the river's traveling slowly in these areas, it actually starts to drop material and sediment that's floating in the river. Just can't hold it anymore. There's not enough energy, so it just deposits it. And this creates kind of, I guess, what you might call a beach or a river beach. Its technical name is a slip-off slope. Okay, and that stuff's going to start to build up on the bottom of the river until eventually it's actually above the river. Now that leads to stage two. We can see here we've now got an established river beach, okay, in these areas, and we've got the river eroding more. Okay, now what that's going to do is that's going to really start to exaggerate the movement of water across our river channel. Okay, so if we just have a little peer into our river itself, because it's now starting to bend, the water's now getting very concentrated. It's almost like it's ping-ponging back and forward across the river channel. If you were in a kayak, for example, sailing down this river, you would naturally follow this back and forward motion. Your canoe would get dragged by the fastest current across the channel back and forward. And on this side, you'd see these steep river cliffs developing. Now, that's due to erosional processes like hydraulic action. And you might remember that's where water gets into cracks in the riverbank, and in those cracks there's some air, and as the water squeezes in, it compresses the air and causes those cracks to expand, weaken, and eventually the riverbank will collapse. The river current is also carrying lots of little stones and pebbles, and it throws them against the riverbanks, especially in these locations, in a process called abrasion, further increasing the rate of erosion. So give this over time, you can see that over here, you're going to just end up with loads of erosion, and this bank's going to continually get worn away, as it will over here, as it will over here. On the opposite side, on the slower, you're going to continually get more stuff getting deposited because the river's traveling slower on these bits. Okay. which then leads you to the third diagram. And now you can see the meander is really exaggerated. So we started off life as a straight channel, and largely to do with this idea of pools and riffles. There is another kind of process going on in the water. Water naturally travels like a corkscrew. It's called heliocoidal flow. And you can imagine a corkscrew with a kind of a spiraling motion. And water travels in this kind of spiral towards you. And that's another reason why it kind of moves across a river channel. But that movement back and forward across a channel leads to one side getting eroded and one side having material deposited on it, which leads to the meander growing over time and becoming more and more exaggerated. Right. What we've got on this next page is just kind of a real photo that shows you what's happening. So what we can see is water's coming down towards you. And here, because of the heliocoidal flow and the Thalweg, the water's getting forced to this outside bank. And you can see here, it's actually undercutting the bank, and bits of the riverbank have actually been broken off. And that's because of abrasion and hydraulic action. And on the opposite side of the river, if we just go over here, this material has all been deposited. Now, it's not a river beach. In this case, you can actually see grass has started to grow on it. But this is just loose sediment that's been dumped over years. And in this area here, you can see some pebbles also starting to build up. And that's because the current's traveling much slower and can't carry material. So over time, if we look at our river, over here, it's going to move this way because there's going to be more erosion on this side. And this riverbank's moving this way. So the whole channel over time is going to be moving this way. But if we look up here at the top, we can see it's doing the opposite. The river's moving this way, leading to those exaggerated meanders that we saw in the previous slide. Right, now you're ready to draw your diagrams. Now, what I've done for you this week is I've given you your pre-drawn diagrams, and there are only two. So what you're going to want to do is get yourself a piece of paper, draw this first diagram here. You'll see everything I've just said in the tutorial so far is already labeled up for you. So here we have our straighter channel with all of the key features that were going on when our river was very straight. Here we have another, but the river's got much larger bend to it now, and hydraulic action and abrasion and undercutting of the river cliff, material getting deposited as a slip-off slope, and I've even mentioned this idea of helicoidal flow. So what you probably want to do right now is pause the video and draw this onto a sheet of A4 paper, both diagrams. You can use color if you want. Make sure you add all the annotations. And then just like you've done with other ones, photograph those two sketches and upload them to the Google Drive if you've got the app on your phone after taking a photo of it. And then just put it into the correct section of the Google Doc that I've given you, which is hydrosphere number 3. And what I then want you to do, you'll see this is a little bit different this week. I'll show you the task that you've been set. Just scroll down in your hydrosphere 3. You see, sorry about this, it's just very once you've of your hydrosphere number 3, you've taken a photo and put down on the following page, you will see to write 10 missing words. Okay, and you've got to use the diagram and my